Rain struck the harbor sideways when Dante Moretti dragged Elena Ward from the wheelhouse and accused her of steering his armored cargo convoy into an ambush before his captains. He tore the command badge from the 150-kilogram tugboat Captain Escote and abandoned her aboard a disabled vessel as a Category 4 hurricane closed the shipping channel. She had 40 minutes before the storm surge crushed the tug against the breakwater. Yet one detail made no sense. Every ship Elena had supposedly redirected still appeared on Dante's tracking screen, moving toward open water without crews answering their radios. Then Elena discovered a second navigation transmitter bolted beneath her console broadcasting orders in her name. As Dante's fleet disappeared into the black rain, she made one final call. Those ships aren't carrying your weapons, they recarrying every person your traitor needs dead. At 6:08 p.m., rain hammered Pier 9 hard enough to flatten the harbor flags. Elena Ward kept both hands on the brass rail outside the wheelhouse of the Mercy Jane, while Dante Moretti held her command badge between two tattooed fingers. At 29, Elena had spent 11 years learning how wind moved between warehouses, how a tug answered half a second before its instruments admitted it, and how fear changed a captainess' voice. Her navy storm coat covered practical black trousers and steel-toed deck boots. Wet auburn hair clung to her youthful round face. Her very large body, soft arms, broad hips, thick legs, and a prominent belly made the narrow bridge crowded, but nothing in her movements was uncertain. Dante stood opposite her in a black weatherproof coat over a midnight suit. Rain shone on the dense black and gray tattoos, rising from his open collar and covering the backs of his hands. His angular face remained cold even while his jaw tightened. "Your authorization rerouted, convoy read at 5:41, he said. 12 minutes later, the Aquila lost contact. On the tablet held by his security chief, Vincent Rusk, Elena's credential appeared beside a route that sent 6 armored freighters through North Cut, where the Belandi family maintained hidden gunboats. "I authorized an emergency separation," Elena said. "Not North Cut." Rusk played a recording. Elena's voice gave the false coordinates, then added the private phrase Dante required from senior commanders. "The tide remembers." She had spoken those words earlier that afternoon during a radio test. Hearing them stitched to an order she had never given chilled her more than the rain. "Let me inspect the relay log," she said. Rusk tilted the tablet away. She deleted it. Elena looked at Dante. For 5 years she had moved his legal cargo, rescued his damaged ships, and quietly prevented his impulsive captains from turning accidents into wars. Their intimacy existed in unfinished cups of coffee, and midnight calls neither acknowledged. Now his eyes treated her as an unknown vessel carrying explosives. "The Mercy Jane has a duplicate transmitter," she said. "Someone bolted it under my console." Dante glanced once toward the wheelhouse. Rusk stepped between them, a convenient discovery on her own tug. The harbor siren changed pitch. Hurricane Cora had turned north faster than forecast. On Elena's panel, the storm surge warning jumped to 7 feet. Pier gates would seal at 6:48. "Give me 40 minutes, she said. "I can prove the orders originated elsewhere. You used those 40 minutes to move my people beyond protection." Dante pulled the bronze badge from her coat. The pin tore fabric, but not skin. He ordered his men onto the patrol launch. Before leaving, he faced Elena across the deck. "If one person aboard those ships dies, there will be no harbor where you can hide." Pain crossed his eyes and vanished behind control. He cut the tow line. The launch disappeared into rain, leaving the Mercy Jane with a disabled port engine and no berth. Elena entered the wheelhouse. The standard transmitter showed no recent outgoing order because Rusk had wiped its local cache. She dropped to one knee with difficulty, braced against the pitching deck, and opened the Console S maintenance panel. A black transmitter was bolted behind the cable race. Its indicator blinked with every phantom command appearing on Dante's tracking network. She photographed the serial plate with her waterproof phone, then used insulated pliers to disconnect the antenna. The device continued transmitting. It had its own hidden aerial and battery. At 6:19, the 6 missing ships turned east in perfect formation. Their crews ignored both emergency and Coast Guard frequencies. Elena recognized the formation, a funeral corridor used when ships carried witnesses too dangerous to keep ashore together. Those freighters were not transporting weapons. Before Cora arrived, Dante had ordered the evacuation of accountants, dock supervisors, and customs intermediaries who could testify against Belandi money laundering. Someone had gathered every witness onto 6 steel coffins and used Elena's name to sail them out. She keyed the old analog transmitter that only senior captains still monitored. Dante, listen carefully. Those ships aren't carrying your weapons. They were carrying every person your traitor needs dead. Static swallowed the first reply. Then Dante's voice broke through. How do you know what was loaded? Elena stared at the manifest she had secretly copied at 4:52 after finding 2 names that belonged to men officially dead, because I changed the cargo myself. For 3 seconds, only the hurricane spoke. Then Dante said, "You just confessed." The analog signal died before Elena could explain. Someone was jamming the harbor in measured bursts, 20 seconds on and 10 seconds off. She logged the rhythm in pencil on the paper chart beside her wheel. Digital systems could be rewritten. Graphite could not. At 6:23, water surged over the lowest section of Pier 9. The Mercy Jane swung broadside because her port engine had been sabotaged by a clean cut through the fuel control cable. Elena engaged the starboard engine at low thrust and used the storm wind against the high wheelhouse. Letting the tug weather vane away from the breakwater, a smaller captain might have tried to overpower the sea. Elena knew survival began by respecting which force was stronger. She had indeed changed the cargo. At 4:52, the official manifests listed weapons crates. Physical draft readings showed each freighter sat too high in the water. Elena had opened one sealed container and found cots, medicine, and witness identification packets. Believing Dante had authorized a covert evacuation, she replaced 2 suspicious containers with emergency water and survival gear. She had also moved the witness master list from the network to a paper envelope hidden beneath the Mercy Jane's magnetic compass. Only 3 people knew: Elena, Dante's Harbor Counsel Miriam Vale, and Vincent Rusk. Miriam called through a brief gap in the jamming. Elena, surrender the list. Vincent says you sold the witnesses. Where are you? Operations bunker. Is Vincent beside you? Silence answered first. Yes. Elena ended the call. A safe warning was impossible while Rusk controlled the bunker, the digital network, and access to Dante. She pulled the analog direction finder from a cabinet. It was an obsolete gray box she had repaired with her late father, Captain Samuel Ward. The needle responded not to data labels, but to radio energy. The phantom transmitter beneath her console pointed south toward harbor operations. Yet its signal arrived 2 milliseconds early, proof that the device merely repeated a stronger source. The source lay offshore. Elena plotted 3 signal bearings while the tug drifted. Their intersection landed on Beacon 12, an automated navigation tower near North Cut. Maintenance records claimed its power had been disconnected 6 months ago. The starboard engine temperature climbed. She could not reach the convoy with one engine, but she could reach the old salvage dock west of the harbor if she survived the gate closure. At 6:31, Dante called again from the patrol launch. "Send me the witness list." "Not while Rusk has your network." "You accuse my security chief after admitting you moved the cargo?" "I moved 2 containers because the draft marks contradicted the manifests." "Ask Rusk why his recording has no propeller cavitation under my voice. Every transmission from my wheelhouse carries it." Behind Dante, Rusk said something Elena could not hear. "Send the list," Dante repeated. "Verify Beacon 12 first." "You don't give me conditions," that was his flaw. Dante believed authority survived only when no one saw him hesitate. Elena had protected that belief by solving problems before they reached him. Now her silence looked like betrayal. A heavy impact threw her against the chart table. The Mercy Jane had struck a floating cargo pallet. Pain flared along her right hip, but she remained upright. Through the rain, she saw a harbor rescue skiff overturned near the eastern wall, its emergency light blinking. The safest course was west. The moral course was east. Elena turned the tug toward the skiff. With only the starboard engine, she approached against the wind. So the Mercy Janesley sheltered 2 dockworkers clinging to the hull. She lowered a recovery sling, rather than attempt the narrow ladder in the surge. Her strength and low center of gravity helped her control the line while each man was lifted aboard. One had a broken wrist. The other was hypothermic but conscious. "Russ's men locked us out," the injured worker said. "They were installing something on Beacon 12. He removed a soaked plastic work tag from his neck. It recorded entry at 3:14 p.m. under an authorization code assigned to Rusk's. Level 1 proof, not enough to convict, but enough to show the official story was incomplete." At 6:43, Elena guided the tug through the salvage gate, seconds before steel barriers closed behind her. She sent Dante a photograph of the work tag and the transmitter's serial plate through an independent satellite messenger. The reply came from Rusk's account. "Thank you for identifying the survivors." Across the dark water, 2 armed men entered the salvage yard. Elena killed the wheelhouse lights and told the rescued dockworkers to stay below. The salvage basin was protected from the worst waves, but the hurricane turned cranes into groaning silhouettes. Her right hip hurt when she climbed down to the aft deck, so she moved carefully rather than pretend the impact had not mattered. The armed men split at the pier. They wore Moretti rain gear, yet neither used the hand signals required in high wind. Elena recognized contractors from Rusk's private security roster. She took the witness envelope from beneath the compass and sealed it inside a floating flare canister. Then she tied the canister beneath the recovery sling, lowering it into black water where it remained secured to the tug but invisible from the deck. The first man entered the wheelhouse. Elena triggered the fire suppression fog from the engine panel. White vapor filled the narrow room. She did not fight him. She released the deck brake, letting the wind swing the stern and knock a suspended tire fender into his legs. He fell against the chart table. Elena locked the exterior door. The second man aimed at her from the pier. A shot shattered the aft window. Elena dropped behind the towing winch and activated the emergency floodlight. The sudden glare blinded him long enough for the injured dockworker, Aaron Pike, to sound the tug's horn. The man flinched and retreated as harbor police sirens approached outside the sealed gates. Elena knew the police channel was monitored. She could not remain. She gave Aaron her satellite messenger and the photographed evidence, instructing him to ask specifically for Coast Guard Lieutenant Naomi Chen, not local harbor command. "Why trust her?" Aaron asked. "Because she fined me last year when Dante wanted the inspection buried. An honest adversary was safer than a compromised ally." Elena crossed to a maintenance shed through waist-high spray, not open water. Inside, she found Rusk's contractors had left a portable relay case. Its shipping label bore the same batch number as the transmitter under her console. The devices were purchased by North Atlantic Safety Systems, a shell vendor used by Moretti Security. She photographed the label, then removed a tamper seal with the serial number intact, physical proof of access. At 7:02, Lieutenant Chen reached the yard with 4 Coast Guard officers. Elena surrendered the seal and explained the relay bearings. Chen examined the tug, the trapped contractor, and the work tag. "I can protect the witnesses here," Chen said. "I can chase 6 freighters into hurricane conditions without a verified distress call. Their radios are being looped. Then give me something a judge can authenticate." Elena needed Beacon 12's original transmission log. The beacon stored a Right-On's engineering record in a hardened cabinet. Designed to survive lightning and lawsuits, it could show which control station generated the false orders. Chen agreed to send a cutter after the eye wall passed, no earlier than 9:20. That would be too late. The convoy would reach Belandi-controlled international water at 8:55. Meanwhile, Dante boarded his flagship, the Principessa. At 7's Vincent Rusk stayed close, feeding him a clean story. Elena had moved the witnesses, hidden the list, planted hardware on her own tug, and attacked Moretti personnel sent to recover her. Yet the photograph of Aaron's work tag troubled Dante. Elena always photographed paper records beside a mechanical clock, so timestamps could not be disputed. The image showed the salvage yard clock at 6:44 and rainwater still dripping from Aaron's sleeve. It was a stable habit, not a trick invented tonight. Dante asked Rusk to open Beacon 12's maintenance file. "The database is down," Rusk said too quickly. The first contradiction became personal. Elena had protected rescued workers before protecting herself. Selling witnesses while risking her life for 2 dock workers did not fit the woman Dante knew. At 7:17, Elena used a harbor maintenance launch stored in the shed. Chen could not legally authorize departure, but she did not confiscate the keys. "If you die out there," Chen said, "your evidence becomes an accusation no one can test. Then keep Aaron alive." Elena wore a flotation vest over her storm coat and strapped her bruised hip. The small launch rose violently in the channel, so she followed the seawall rather than take open water. The 2-mile trip to Beacon 12 took 28 minutes. She arrived at 7:45. The tower door showed no forced entry. Rusk's master security cylinder had opened it legitimately. Inside the hardened cabinet, the Right-On's log was missing. In its place lay Elena's bronze command badge, wet with fresh blood. Elena did not touch the badge. She photographed it beside the beacon clock, then called Lieutenant Chen on the satellite messenger. Before the connection completed, Footsteps climbed the steel stairs below. Miriam Vale emerged, holding one hand against a cut above her eyebrow. The harbor counsel's gray suit was soaked beneath a borrowed raincoat. "Vincent discovered I called you," Miriam said. "I escaped through the Bunker S service tunnel." Elena kept the launch key in her pocket. "Why is my badge here?" "Because he needs Dante to believe you came here after the convoy departed." Miriam explained that Rusk had used North Atlantic safety systems to install repeaters on all 6 freighters. He planned to deliver the witnesses to Carlo Bellandi in exchange for control of Moretti's legal port concessions. At midnight, a federal compliance review would freeze any concession linked to missing witnesses. With Dante blamed for their deaths, Rusk could invoke an emergency succession clause and assume operational control. The motive fit, the deadline fit, but Miriam offered no document and knew details she should not have possessed. "Where is the beacon log?" Elena asked. "Vincent took it to the Principessa. We can board through the pilot hatch." Miriam wanted Elena moving toward Dante's flagship. That could be a rescue plan or a delivery. Elena transmitted the badge photograph to Chen. Then she inspected the cabinet's empty bracket. A strip of blue nitrile glove had caught beneath a screw. Rusk wore black tactical gloves. Miriam used blue gloves when handling contracts in flooded archives. Elena said nothing. At 7:52, Dante received a security video showing Elena entering Beacon 12 at 3:16 that afternoon. In truth, she had inspected its exterior from the maintenance launch, but never entered. The video placed her inside by using footage from a different tower, whose door opened in the opposite direction. Rusk added the final corroboration. Elena's bloodied badge had been found near the body of Moretti radio technician Paul Neri, stabbed in the beacon else lower chamber. Dante ordered the tower surrounded. Elena heard the Principessa's engines before she saw its lights. Miriam drew a compact pistol. "Give me the witness list," she said. There was the missing truth. Miriam, not Rusk, had known Elena copied it. Rusk controlled systems. Miriam controlled the legal mechanism and the succession clause. They were partners. But Miriam intended to make Rusk the visible traitor and inherit the concessions through Bellandi. Elena backed toward the cabinet. "If you shoot me, the list sinks with the tug." Miriam's eyes flickered. She had not known the envelope was gone. Elena triggered the beacon's lightning ground alarm. A steel fire door dropped between them. Miriam fired once. The bullet struck Elena's left forearm before the door sealed. The wound burned, but the round passed through the outer flesh without breaking bone. Elena wrapped it tightly with a clean maintenance bandage. She descended the exterior ladder to the launch. Dante's men approached from the south, while Bellandi gunboats approached from the north. Elena sent Chen her live coordinates, then drove west into the narrow service channel between the breakwater stones. The larger gunboats could not follow. Dante entered Beacon. 12 at 8:04. Miriam had reopened the fire door and arranged herself beside Neri's body. She claimed Elena shot her way out after murdering him. Rusk handed Dante the recovered command badge and a blood-smeared knife bearing Elena's fingerprints. She had used that knife for rope work aboard the Mercy Jane that morning. Dante called Elena. Wind and static fractured their words. "Come back," he ordered. "Face what you did. Miriam and Rusk are working together." The knife came from my tug. Miriam cried out behind him that Elena was lying. Dante's silence lasted 1 second too long. "Surrender before anyone else dies," he said. The wrong decision struck harder than the bullet. Elena had expected anger. She had not expected him to choose the people standing nearest over the woman who had kept his empire afloat. "You already decided what I am," she replied. "Now live long enough to learn what they are." She removed the satellite messenger's battery, turned off her running lights, and disappeared into the hurricane. She did not mistake escape for safety with no lights. She navigated by the breakwater-esque rhythm and the compass glow covered by her palm. Every impact against the hull reminded her that her body and boat had limits. She reduced speed, kept the injured arm against her chest, and chose the abandoned dry dock because its entrance was invisible from the main channel at high tide. Before grounding the launch, she drew a pencil bearing from the dock toward Marine on the paper chart. If Chen found it, the mark would guide an honest investigator. If Miriam found it first, the empty workshop office would buy Elena time. She then walked the sheltered canal path in short, painful stages, refusing the tempting but exposed road. By 9:10, the eye wall had moved north of the harbor. Rain remained heavy, but the wind weakened enough for the Coast Guard cutter Resolute to leave its protected berth. Elena was not aboard. Lieutenant Chen had only her last coordinates, the work tag, the relay seal, and Aaron Pike's testimony. Dante returned to the Principessa with Miriam and Rusk. His fleet still appeared to be moving east. At 9:16, he ordered a voice challenge that required each captain to report the color of the sealed envelope issued that morning. All 6 answered blue. 2 envelopes had been red. The technical contradiction opened beneath him. The radio loop had been created before the envelopes were distributed. He asked Rusk for the raw recordings. Rusk claimed storm corruption. Dante then ordered Miriam to produce the emergency succession clause. She recited it perfectly, but resisted showing the signed original, saying it remained in the flooded operations bunker. At 9:28, Dante sent his cousin Marco Moretti to test both allies with controlled information. Marco told Rusk that Coast Guard divers had recovered Beacon 12's Rydon's log. He told Miriam that Elena had surrendered the witness list. Within 6 minutes, Belandi gunboats changed course toward the beacon, while 2 contractors raided the salvage yard, searching specifically beneath the Mercy, Jane's compass. Rusk reacted to the false log. Miriam reacted to the false list. The adversarial contradiction was complete. Dante's face did not change, but guilt settled behind his eyes. He had mistaken Elena's refusal to obey for disloyalty because obedience was easier to measure than truth. He ordered Marco to detain Rusk quietly. Rusk anticipated him. The flagship's bridge doors locked. Fire alarms activated, and armed contractors seized the engine room. Miriam drew her pistol, no longer pretending injury made her helpless. At midnight, she told Dante, "Your concessions become uninsurable. Your witnesses become bodies, and your captains choose a leader who did not lose an empire to a tugboat woman." Rusk appeared on the bridge monitor from the engine control room. He admitted nothing, but announced that the Principessa would proceed to the Maritime Founders Gala at St. Aurelia Terminal. The event had to continue because governors, port commissioners, insurers, and rival families were already sheltering there. Publicly transferring emergency authority would make the seizure appear lawful. Dante had built systems that concentrated power in a crisis. Miriam had turned those systems into a cage. At 9:42, Chen's cutter found Elena's maintenance launch grounded deliberately inside an abandoned dry dock. Blood marked the seat. but there was no body. A pencil line on the chart pointed to Ward Marine Salvage, a family workshop 3 miles inland along the old canal. Dante learned this through Marco, who had escaped the bridge before lockdown. He left the flagship through a ballast inspection passage known only to the Moretti family and transferred to the Resolute. He carried no phone. Only Elena's bronze badge, sealed in an evidence bag, and a compact pistol surrendered to Chen upon boarding. They reached Ward Marine at 10:21 after slow passage through storm debris. The workshop lights were dark. Inside, Elena sat beside a diesel heater while retired engineer Joseph Ward, her father's older brother, stitched the edge of her forearm wound. Her storm coat hung nearby. She wore a dry charcoal sweater and loose work trousers. Her right hip was deeply bruised, and every step hurt. Joseph had found her at the canal door 18 minutes earlier and wanted an ambulance. Elena refused until she had confirmed the bullet had passed cleanly through soft tissue and until she had transferred her photographs onto an offline workshop computer. He disinfected the wound, closed only the ragged edge, and warned her that proper hospital treatment remained necessary. The delay was a calculated risk, not a cure. Elena wrote every medication and treatment time on the chart so no later decision would depend on a body suddenly forgetting its injuries. When Dante entered, Elena raised a flare gun. He stopped. His wet suit clung to his shoulders, neck tattoos visible above the open collar. "You were right. That sentence does not restore the dead technician or the hours you gave them. Neri is alive." Chen's medic found a pulse. Miriam staged the blood. Relief crossed Elena's face, then hardened. "Why are you here?" Dante placed the sealed badge on the workbench. "To ask what you need, not to order what I want." Before she could answer, Joseph switched on an old marine receiver. A weak distress signal repeated from beneath a field of static. Elena recognized the rhythm. 6 freighters were not east of the harbor. They were anchored less than 2 miles from St. Aurelia Terminal. Elena lowered the flare gun but did not invite Dante closer. The synthetic tracking signal had sent icons east, while the actual ships moved without identification beacons inside the Storm S radar clutter. Their low-frequency distress transmitters could penetrate water and steel, but only Joseph S. pre-digital receiver still monitored the discontinued band. Elena mapped the signal strengths. The 6 ships were arranged around St. Aurelia Terminal, each close enough to block an evacuation lane. Miriam planned to hold everyone at the gala while the midnight compliance review transferred control. "The witnesses are alive," Elena said. "The transmitters are attached to their emergency belts inside the containers." Dante studied her paper chart rather than pretending to understand. "How do we reach them?" "We do not sail 6 freighters through a mined approach. In this weather, we separate the repeaters from the captain's controls and make Miriam reveal her command station." Joseph produced the Mercy Jane's original construction plans. Years earlier, Elena's father had fitted a mechanical override into the Harbor's towing control network after a software failure trapped 3 ferries. Every legal tug retained a hardwired tone generator capable of opening emergency mooring clamps. Rusk's contractors had copied modern systems but overlooked the analog safeguard. The Mercy Jane remained at the salvage yard, and the yard was now occupied. Dante offered men. Elena refused an assault. Gunfire near the terminal could trigger panic or give Miriam justification to sink a ship. "Then what?" he asked. "You return to the gala and appear defeated. Publicly. Accept the succession. Vote make Miriam believe I abandoned you. His jaw tightened. And you? I take back my tug. Your arm is wounded, not useless. My hip limits climbing, not steering. Do not confuse concern with command. He accepted the correction that mattered more than an apology spoken too soon. At 10:36, they built an uneasy alliance. Dante would return with Chen under the pretense of negotiating Coast Guard access. Marco would circulate a controlled rumor that Elena had fled inland with the witness list. Joseph would transmit a false salvage distress call that required Rusk's contractors to leave the yard or risk exposing their position to federal rescue logs. Elena and Chen approached the salvage yard at 10:58 in an unmarked utility truck. The contractors had moved to the northern gate to intercept the supposed distress team. Elena entered through the old canal doors, which opened mechanically from Joseph's key. The Mercy Jane had taken water but remained afloat. Aaron's flare canister still hung beneath the recovery sling. Elena retrieved the dry witness envelope and gave it directly to Chen, who sealed it, signed the transfer time, and placed it in a waterproof evidence case. Chain of custody now belonged to federal hands. In the wheelhouse, Elena removed the duplicate transmitter without disturbing its internal memory. Chen photographed every stage. The device contained a manufacturer's service port. Its read-only diagnostic screen displayed 2 administrator certificates, Rusk V and Vale M. Level 2 evidence linked both conspirators to the mechanism. But certificates could be stolen. They still needed proof of knowing intent and the command that endangered the witnesses. At 11:14, Dante entered St. Aurelia Terminal. The gala occupied a glass-walled maritime museum above the storm-dark harbor. Guests in formal clothes clustered beneath emergency lights. Miriam wore a silver evening gown and a discreet bandage at her temple. Rusk had changed into a black suit and stood beside the temporary command console. Dante's dry midnight suit and open-collar shirt concealed none of his neck tattoos. He looked controlled, not conquered. He announced that, to preserve port operations, he would permit an emergency confidence vote at 11:45. Miriam smiled faintly. She believed the circle closing. At 11:19, Elena restarted the Mercy. Jane, her forearm throbbed beneath a fresh bandage. Her hip protested each time she crossed the bridge. Chen stayed aboard with 2 officers. But Elena alone knew how to steer the damaged tug through the service channel. Before departure, Chen duplicated the transmitter memory onto 2 sealed Coast Guard drives. One stayed in her evidence case. The second went by patrol car to the federal command post inland. Elena insisted on the redundancy because a single copy aboard a storm-damaged tug was not evidence it was a hostage. Aaron signed a statement identifying the work tag, while the trapped contractor was transported separately and forbidden contact with Rusk's other men. Each precaution narrowed the conspiracy ability to explain away the truth later. They cleared the salvage gate. On the radar, 6 invisible steel masses surrounded the terminal. Then every low-frequency distress signal stopped at once. The silence meant Miriam had discovered the emergency belts. Elena reduced speed and listened through the hull hydrophone. 6 sets of engines idled ahead. A 7th, smaller engine moved between them, a control launch distributing armed teams. She could not use the hardwired override until the Mercy Jane reached the central towing buoy, and the launch patrolled directly across her route. Chen suggested, calling the Coast Guard Tactical Unit. Elena pointed to the terminal windows. Hundreds of guests stood above exposed fuel lines and mooring cables. A visible raid would give Rusk time to trigger his contingency instead. Elena opened the duplicate transmitter's diagnostic memory. It recorded command hashes but not message content. One hash repeated at 5:41, 6:19, and the moment the distress belts went silent. The administrator certificate was Valem. Miriam is issuing the strategic commands, Elena said. Rusk built the system, still not enough. A certificate could be used remotely without its owner's knowledge. Elena proposed a controlled leak. Marco would tell Miriam that the Coast Guard had recovered only Rusk's certificate. If Miriam believed she could sacrifice him safely, she would use her own command again during the public vote. Dante delivered the rumor at 11:27 by accusing Rusk privately within range of Miriam's counsel. Rusk denied everything. Miriam defended him just enough to avoid suspicion, then excused herself to contact insurers. On the Mercy Jane, the diagnostic screen lit with a new Valem command. The hidden freighters increased engine power and tightened their circle chens. Body camera recorded the screen, the time, and the corresponding movement on independent marine radar. Level 3 was taking shape. Digital command, physical consequence, and independent observation. Elena needed command content. Joseph radioed that North Atlantic's repeaters used a safety requirement. Every dangerous remote instruction generated an acoustic backup inside the administrator console, allowing investigators to reconstruct it after collision. The Gala console would hold Miriam's spoken authorization. The missing proof was inside St. Aurelia. At 11:33, Elena steered behind a grounded grain barge to hide from the patrol launch. She engaged the tone generator. The first pulse opened the emergency clamp on Freighter 1. Its bow drifted 6 feet, breaking the perfect blockade without alerting operators who watched only synthetic coordinates. She repeated the process on Freighters 2 and 3. The damaged tug's engine temperature rose toward the red line. Chen asked how many openings they needed. 1 path wide enough for rescue boats. 2 paths if we want the truth to survive. At the gala, Dante delayed the vote by demanding each council member inspect the succession clause. Miriam could not refuse without weakening its legitimacy. Marco photographed the signature page and sent it to Chen. The notary's stamp belonged to a lawyer who had died 8 months before the document's alleged signing, another evidentiary strand. Separate from the navigation conspiracy, proved fraud behind the objective. At 11:38, Rusk realized the real ships were drifting. He ordered contractors to seize the towing buoy and destroy the analog control. The patrol launch found the Mercy Jane. Bullets struck the water near the bow. Chennis officers returned controlled fire at the launch's engine, disabling it without hitting the crew. The tug continued toward the buoy. Elena marked the disabled launch's position and broadcast a rescue notice, despite the men aboard having tried to kill her. Chen understood the choice immediately and relayed it to another cutter. Saving enemies was not softness. It protected lives, prevented Miriam from manufacturing martyrs, and demonstrated that Elena's decisions remained governed by maritime duty rather than revenge. Dante heard the notice over the museum receiver. It gave him another measure of the woman he had misjudged. Even with minutes left, she refused to become what her accusers described. Elena's starboard engine warning sounded. She could either stop and preserve the tug or run it hot. For 7 more minutes, her father had built the Mercy. Jane keeping it had been her private link to him. But 6 freighters held living people. She pushed the throttle. At 11:42, Dante called through the analog channel. Miriam moved the vote to 11:46. She knows something changed. Let her win the vote, Elena said. Then ask her to demonstrate control of the fleet. That gives her exactly what she wants. For 30 seconds. Dante looked through the glass wall toward the invisible ships. Trust for him had once meant compliance. Now it meant placing his empire inside Elena's plan without seeing the entire route. 30 seconds, he agreed. At 11:45, the emergency council assembled beneath the suspended hull of a 19th-century rescue boat. Port commissioners, insurers, captains, and representatives of 8 crime families faced a temporary stage. Hurricane rain streaked the glass behind them. Dante stood at one side, still and severe. Miriam stood at the other with the fraudulent succession document. Rusk remained near the command console, but 2 of his men had vanished toward the towing buoy. Miriam presented the crisis as Dante's failure. Missing witnesses, compromised ships, an accused captain at large, and federal scrutiny approaching midnight. She claimed emergency authority was necessary to prevent economic collapse. When the vote passed by 1 ballot, she placed her palm on the console and accepted control. Dante lowered his gaze as though defeated. On the water, Elena reached the towing buoy at 11:46. Rusk's contractors climbed the opposite ladder. Because her hip prevented a fast ascent, Chen went up with 1 officer, while Elena stayed at the wheel. She transmitted 3 override tones, opening freighters 4, 5, and 6. The blockade loosened. Rescue lanes appeared. Then Miriam adapted. Instead of ordering the ships to remain, she initiated Black Harbor, a contingency that locked container ventilation and scheduled all 6 freighters to scuttle at 11:53. The action required 2 administrators. Rusk's certificate joined hers. The diagnostic screen displayed both hashes but no words. At the gala, Dante asked Miriam to prove her authority could stabilize the fleet. She turned toward the audience and said, "Observe the console sounded an acoustic confirmation. Black Harbor authorized. 6 witness vessels sealed. Scuttle sequence 7 minutes. Marco recorded it on an independent analog tape machine, concealed inside the museum's oral history exhibit. The device had been tested in public that afternoon, and its continuous reel included the entire gala, preventing claims that the sentence was edited. Miriam heard the confirmation and realized the console had spoken too clearly. She ordered Rusk to erase it. Rusk reached for the drive. Dante seized his wrist, tattoos tightening across the back of his hand. His expression remained cold, but violence lived in the stillness of his posture. "You will leave it where it is," Dante said. Miriam drew a small pistol from beneath her gown and aimed not at Dante but at the museum's glass evacuation controls. A shot shattered the panel, locking storm shutters over the exits. Her guards moved among the guests. "The vote is complete," she announced. "By midnight, Dante Moretti will be responsible for every death in this harbor." The guests did not become a mindless crowd. Port workers guided older attendees away from the glass. Captains quietly counted the guards. Commissioner Hale activated the museum's fire-safe ventilation, so panic would not turn the sealed hall lethal. Dante used those disciplined movements to keep Miriam talking. He asked which insurers had accepted her authority and why the ships needed remote control if their captains were loyal. Each answer placed another part of her objective before independent witnesses, even though she avoided a direct confession. On the Mercy Jane, Elena heard the scuttle countdown. Ventilation locks could be reversed only from each ship or through the towing network's physical emergency circuit. The circuit lacked power because Rusk's men had cut the buoy feed. The tug could provide power through its towing cable, but its overheated engine would likely fail under the load. Elena positioned the Mercy Jane beside the buoy and told Chen to attach the cable. Her left arm could not manage the heavy connector, so she used the deck winch and guided it with her right hand. Practical adaptation, not impossible strength, completed the link. At 11:49, power flowed into the buoy. The engine temperature entered the red zone. Inside the gala, Dante appeared to reject Elena over the public channel. "Captain Ward acted alone," he said. "No one is to follow her instructions." Miriam relaxed, believing he had abandoned Elena again. But the statement was their fallback signal. "Acted alone" meant the main plan was compromised. "No one is to follow" meant Elena should trigger the mechanical release without waiting for Dante. She sent the emergency tones. The first 5 ventilation locks opened. The 6th did not. Its manual receiver had been removed. The ship carrying Aaron Pike's sister and the original customs witnesses began settling lower in the water. The Mercy Jane's engine failed at 11:51. Elena looked at the powerless controls, then at the towing cable still linking her tug to the buoy. The only remaining source was the tug's emergency battery, enough for lights or one final transmission, not both. She shut off every light. In complete darkness, she sent the last override. The 6th ventilation lock opened at 11:52 and 21 seconds. Fresh air reached the sealed containers, but the scuttle valves remained active. Elena had 39 seconds. The emergency battery could not close all 6 valves. She used the towing network to issue a harbor-wide collision command instead. Mechanical clamps released simultaneously, and the freighters began drifting apart. Their captains, no longer trapped by remote steering, regained local control and shut the scuttle valves manually. At 11:53, ship horns sounded one after another across the Black Harbor. The witnesses were alive. St. Aurelia's guests turned toward the glass emergency lights from 6 freighters appeared through the rain, contradicting every synthetic track Rusk had displayed. Elena's voice entered the gala through the analog museum radio. Marco had connected to the public address system. "This is Captain Elena Ward. The vessels are secured. Lieutenant Chen has custody of the witness manifest, the duplicate transmitter, and its diagnostic memory." The command issued at 11:46 came from certificates assigned to Miriam Vale and Vincent Rusk. Miriam shouted that Elena had stolen the certificates. Chen answered from the towing buoy. She stated the chain of custody. Aaron Pike delivered the work tag and photographs. Elena recovered the relay seal under observation. Coast Guard officers documented removal of the transmitter. Radar independently matched each command, and the Gala's continuous analog recording captured Miriam's authorization. Marco carried the tape machine onto the stage. Its reels still turned. He played the unbroken sequence, gala music, the vote, Miriam's voicing observe, and the console confirming Black Harbor. Rusk tried a final rebuttal. The console's language was automated. She did not know what it would do. Elena had anticipated that defense. "Ask Miriam why the order named 6 witness vessels," she said. "That classification existed only on the paper manifest. I removed before departure. The network called them weapons ships until Miriam believed the list had been recovered." Miriam's face changed. She realized the controlled rumor had forced her to reveal knowledge that innocent administrators could not possess. Dante produced the photographed succession clause. A port commissioner confirmed the dead notary's stamp made it fraudulent. An insurer testified that Miriam had requested a conditional transfer policy 3 weeks earlier, effective only if the Moretti witnesses disappeared before midnight. Objective, knowledge, mechanism, and decisive act converged through independent sources. Rusk lunged for the analog tape. Dante intercepted him, but did not execute him. He forced Rusk to the floor and allowed federal officers entering through the reopened service tunnel to take custody. That restraint cost Dante pride before rival families, yet preserved testimony and lawful evidence. Miriam moved toward the shattered evacuation panel. She pressed a concealed switch, triggering explosives on the towing buoy. The charge detonated below the waterline. The structure tilted. Chen and her officers reached the Mercy Jane. But Elena remained at the wheel, pinned when a cabinet door slammed against her bruised hip. Dante saw the flash from the terminal. He started toward the dock. Elena's voice stopped him. "Do not turn this into your rescue." She used the winch remote, still clipped to her flotation vest, to pull the towing cable taut. The movement shifted the tug away from the collapsing buoy and freed the cabinet. Chen helped Elena onto the aft deck. Together they launched the emergency raft. Miriam's escape boat entered the opening between freighters 3 and 4. Elena had created that lane, so she knew its current. She radioed Captain Luis Ortega aboard Freighter 4 to release his stern anchor, not to strike the boat, but to block the channel. The anchor chain rose across Miriam's route. She turned directly into the Coast Guard cutter Resolute. Officers arrested her at 11:58. At midnight, the compliance review began. All 6 witnesses answered, a verified roll call from Coast Guard custody. The concessions did not transfer. Federal agents immediately isolated the captains and witnesses for separate interviews. Their accounts matched on the essential sequence. Rusk's contractors boarded before the storm, removed their communication controls, and threatened families whose addresses had come from confidential legal files. That detail led investigators back to Miriam. The captains also preserved handwritten engine logs showing local controls were overridden at the exact times recorded in the diagnostic memory. The case no longer depended on a criminal's promise to cooperate. Machines, paper victims, and independent officers corroborated one another. Back inside St. Aurelia, Dante faced the council. He could have claimed victory. Instead, he placed Elena's bronze badge on the stage and said, "This woman saved every life I endangered when I chose certainty over truth. The accusation against her was mine. So is the obligation to repair it." For the first time that night, the room's power shifted without a weapon. Dawn came gray over a harbor littered with broken timber, disabled repeaters, and ships that should have become graves. Elena spent 6 hours at St. Matthew's Hospital. The bullet wound required cleaning and stitches but had missed bone and major vessels. Her hip showed no fracture, only deep bruising. Doctors ordered a sling for 2 days, limited lifting, and several weeks of recovery. No miracle erased the pain. Neri survived surgery and identified Miriam as the person who lured him to Beacon 12. Aaron and the rescued dock workers authenticated the maintenance access. Rusk agreed to testify after investigators confronted him with the continuous gala recording and North Atlantic purchase records. Miriam faced federal charges for conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud, unlawful detention, and sabotage. 3 days later, Dante convened the same captains who had watched him strip Elena's badge away. The meeting took place in daylight at Pier 9, not behind the closed doors of his estate. Elena arrived in a dark green wrap dress under a practical wool coat, her left forearm still bandaged. She walked carefully because of her hip. Dante wore a charcoal suit with an open black shirt, the familiar tattoos visible at his neck and hands. His expression remained controlled, but he did not hide behind it. He read a formal statement clearing Elena of every accusation. More importantly, he admitted that his order had abandoned her on a disabled tug during a hurricane and enabled the conspirators' timeline. He restored the wages and licenses of every worker punished by Rusk, funded independent legal representation for the witnesses, and transferred harbor security oversight to a board that included captains, union representatives, and an external compliance officer. Then he offered Elena her badge. She did not take it. "The old job required me to protect your decisions from their consequences," she said. "I will not return to that." Dante lowered his hand. "Name your terms." Elena had already incorporated Ward Harbor Response, an independent emergency navigation company owned by its employees. She proposed a contract under which Moretti vessels would submit to her safety authority during declared emergencies. Her decisions would be reviewable afterward, never overruled during rescue operations for reasons of pride or criminal politics. "And I do not belong to your empire," she added. "No," Dante said, "you do not." He signed without negotiating away her authority. Public restitution did not create forgiveness for 6 weeks. Elena accepted only professional contact. Dante attended every oversight meeting, answered investigators, and sold the security subsidiary Rusk had corrupted. He never asked Elena to comfort him for the guilt he had earned. When the Mercy Jane was declared beyond economical repair, Dante offered to replace it. Elena refused. Insurance, not a gift. Financed Ward Harbor Response new tug. She salvaged the brass wheel and mounted it in the company office as evidence that survival could honor the past without remaining trapped inside it. In early October, after her arm had healed and her hip no longer limited her steps, Elena invited Dante aboard the new tug, the Second Light. The invitation was personal, not contractual. They stood on deck as the sun lowered behind St. Aurelia Terminal. Dante handed her a small box. Inside lay the bronze badge, repaired but not polished. The tear marks remained. "It is not a command," he said. "It is yours to keep, discard, or melt." Elena closed the box. "I will keep it as a warning. For me? For both of us." He accepted that answer. When she kissed him, it was not payment for rescue, apology, or power. It was a choice made after he had learned to stand beside her without placing himself above her. Months later, the Moretti fleet operated under independent emergency rules. Witnesses testified. Harbor workers elected their safety board. Dante remained powerful, but power no longer exempted him from evidence. Elena captained the Second Light through winter storms and clear summer mornings. Her company grew because sailors trusted the woman who had guided 6 ships home when an empire had called her a traitor. On the first anniversary of Hurricane Cora, every vessel in the harbor sounded one long horn at 6:19 p.m. The minute Elena's warning had entered the storm, Dante stood beside her in the wheelhouse. He did not speak over the sound. This time, when Elena chose the course, he followed.